I've always believed that the worst pain isn't just betrayal. It's being betrayed by the people you trust the most. My life might never have turned into a nightmare if it weren't for that fateful day. The day I discovered that the husband I loved with all my heart and my own sister had stabbed me in the back. At the same time, everything seemed peaceful. Daniel and I had been married for 6 years, a marriage I had always thought was happy. Sure, we had our fair share of arguments like any other couple, but I believed that love and respect always prevailed between us. And then, one fateful night, my entire world came crashing down in the cruelest way imaginable. Emma, my younger sister, suddenly returned home after 10 years in New York. She had been building a promising career and had a long-term relationship. But out of nowhere, her boyfriend dumped her without mercy. Feeling sorry for her, I opened my arms, welcomed her back, and even asked Daniel to help her get a job at his company. Part of me wanted to see her back on her feet, and part of me just wanted to reconnect with my sister. I had no idea that this decision would be the very thing that destroyed my life. At first, I was happy to see Emma coming over more often. She and Daniel started talking more, laughing at inside jokes I didn't understand. If I tried to join in, they would just smile and say, "It's a work thing," and I believed them. I was naive enough to think that nothing could possibly happen between my husband and my sister. Things got even stranger when I started noticing small, unsettling changes around the house. The pillows on our bed weren't in the same position I had left them in the morning. Daniel's shirts sometimes carried a faint trace of an unfamiliar perfume. And then the moment of truth arrived, the moment that shattered my world into pieces. One evening, my parents invited us over for dinner. Everything was going fine until I saw something that made my stomach drop. As Daniel walked past Emma, she lightly grabbed his arm. They turned towards each other and pressed their foreheads together. It was quick, subtle, but it was enough. The look in their eyes, the way they touched. It wasn't innocent. It wasn't a casual interaction between in-laws. It was something more, something intimate, something I should have never had to witness. At that moment, my heart shattered. The pain was indescribable, like being stabbed right in the chest by the two people I loved most. And this was just the beginning. I wish I could say that moment at dinner was the worst of it, that I confronted them right then and there, demanded answers, and put an end to the torment. But I didn't. I was paralyzed, caught in a whirlwind of anger, disbelief, and an unsettling feeling. Because deep down, I realized something. This wasn't the first time my sister had taken something from me, and my parents, they had never once stood by my side. Emma had always been the favorite. It was never outright stated, but the evidence piled up over the years, like bricks in a wall separating us. When we both turned 16, she got a nearly new luxury car, while I was handed a worn-out sedan that broke down every other month. My parents spent thousands on her dance competitions, traveling across states for her big performances. Meanwhile, when I asked for a measly $50 to attend a sports camp, they acted as if I was draining their bank account dry. The worst part, the double standards didn't stop at material things. I was once grounded for a full month just for coming home 15 minutes late from a date. A year later, Emma stumbled into the house 2 hours past curfew, reeking of weed. My parents simply sighed, shook their heads, and told her to be more responsible next time. When she left for college, I felt relief more than anything else. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living in her shadow. And when she chose to stay in New York, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally get a chance to exist as more than just Emma's older sister. But then she came back, and within weeks, she had taken my husband, just like she had taken everything else. After that dinner, I became hyper-aware of everything. The way Daniel and Emma looked at each other, the secret conversations disguised as work talk, and the way she always seemed to be at our house when I got home from work. But the worst of it, the bed. Every morning, I made our bed the exact same way, a small, obsessive habit, but one I never failed to do. The pillows always faced outward, until one evening when I came home and saw them flipped inward. It was a tiny detail, something anyone else would dismiss, but I knew better. I asked Daniel if he had been in bed that day. He flinched, just for a second, before quickly covering it up. "No, of course not," he said. "You must be imagining things." I wasn't imagining anything. I felt like I was losing my mind. Every piece of logic screamed at me that something was going on, but I had no proof. They worked together for 8 hours a day. Why would they need to text or call? Every interaction they had in front of me was subtle, calculated, as if they were daring me to catch them, but careful enough to never leave undeniable evidence. The night I saw them touch foreheads should have been the moment I walked away. But instead, I convinced myself I needed something more. One final confirmation. I was about to get it, and when I did, there would be no turning back. I no longer had the patience to pretend I didn't see, no longer naive enough to believe in their lies. I needed the truth, and I needed it now. So, I made a plan. I decided to take Daniel on a weekend getaway, just the two of us. I spent the entire night before our trip thinking, piecing together every little sign I had ignored. And then it hit me. If something was truly going on between them, then they wouldn't be able to stand being apart for too long. The trip started off perfectly, or at least Daniel tried to make it seem that way. We drank, laughed, danced, and shared intimate moments as if nothing was wrong. But I knew better. I could feel the tension beneath his every move. While Daniel was in the shower, I grabbed his phone and sent Emma a flirty text. Within seconds, she responded, her tone dripping with affection and seduction. "I miss you so much, honey." Perfect. I turned on the voice recorder on my phone, ready for the final showdown. As soon as Daniel stepped out of the bathroom, his hair still wet, I sat on the bed, locked eyes with him, and asked, "You're having an affair with Emma, aren't you?" He froze. For a brief moment, I saw the panic flash across his face, before he quickly masked it. "What are you talking about? Don't be ridiculous, babe." I didn't blink. I didn't back down. "Say that again," without looking away. And that was when it happened. The moment of truth. His eyes turned red, and in an instant, I knew I had won. He collapsed onto the chair, burying his face in his hands. When he finally looked up, his voice trembled. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen, but things got out of control." My chest tightened. It felt like someone had punched me straight in the gut, knocking the air out of my lungs. Out of control. I let out a bitter laugh. "How far out of control, Daniel? On our bed?" He looked away, his silence heavier than any confession. I shot to my feet, my blood boiling with fury. I didn't need to hear any more. I stormed toward the door, pausing only to throw one final sentence over my shoulder. "Thanks for confirming. Now get the hell out of my life." I left the hotel immediately, carrying nothing but my wallet and car keys. I drove home, my vision blurred by tears. But I didn't care. Daniel kept calling, kept texting, but I ignored every single one. I had my answer, the one I never wanted. That night, I called my lawyer, sent her all the evidence I had, and made one demand. I want a divorce as soon as possible, and the cheater leaves with nothing. When I arrived home, my parents were already there, waiting, and what they said next pushed me to the absolute brink of fury. My mother crossed her arms, her cold eyes scanning me as if I were the one at fault. My father sat beside her, silent and unremarkable, as always. "What have you done?" My mother spoke, her voice laced with disapproval. I laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh. "What have I done? I just found out that my husband has been sleeping with my own sister. Mother, what do you think I should do? Give them my blessing?" She rolled her eyes, her tone growing irritated. "Stop being so dramatic. Men make mistakes sometimes. Can't you just forgive him?" I froze. My ears rang from the sheer absurdity of her words. I turned to my father, desperately hoping for even the slightest reaction from him. But as always, he simply lowered his head, avoiding my gaze. "What did you just say?" I whispered. my voice trembling with rage. I said, "Don't ruin the family over something so trivial." My mother's voice rose. "Daniel is a good man. You're lucky to have him. And Emma, she didn't mean to hurt you. You know she's been through a lot. She just needed someone to be there for her. You're her sister, you should understand." Every word she spoke was a knife slicing into my skin. I couldn't believe it. They didn't just know. They had condoned it. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked quietly. "From the very beginning, you knew, and you let it happen." She didn't deny it. Instead, she let out a sigh. "Why are you being so stubborn? You'll find someone else. But this family, you can't replace that." I let out a hollow chuckle. "Family? This so-called family has never stood by me, never protected me. And now you expect me to pretend like nothing happened so my sister can live happily ever after with my husband." She shrugged. "She loves Daniel, and Daniel loves her. What's the point in fighting it?" My fury boiled over, hotter than it had ever been. I glared at them, each breath burning in my chest. "Thank you for finally making one thing clear to me. I never belonged here, and now I'm leaving. Forever." I turned my back on them, walking away from the people I had once called my family. They didn't follow. They didn't try to stop me. And in that moment, I realized I had truly lost everything. But in that same moment, I understood. I was finally free. I left without looking back. I sold the house, moved to a new city, and started over from nothing. In the beginning, the pain still haunted me. Sleepless nights, moments where I woke up reaching for someone who was no longer there. But I knew I had no choice but to keep moving forward. I buried myself in work, focused on taking care of myself, and eventually, I found my way back. And then, one fateful day, I met James. James was unlike any man I had ever met. He was warm, genuine, and never once made me question his love. He never hid his phone, never had suspicious late-night conversations, never made me feel like I was second place in my own relationship. He loved me in a simple yet complete way. When I told him about my past, he listened without judgment. When I felt weak, he didn't tell me to be strong. He just held me. After 3 years together, we got married. A small, intimate wedding, surrounded only by those who truly loved me. No parents, no Emma, no one who had ever betrayed me. That was the day I truly stepped into a new chapter, one where I was in full control of my own destiny. And then, life presented me with the ultimate irony. I heard that Daniel and Emma got married just a year after I left. No surprise there. Betrayers always find each other. But what made me laugh bitterly was the fact that their marriage didn't even last 2 years. Emma, true to her nature, cheated. And this time, Daniel was the one being betrayed. They divorced in a messy legal battle. Of course, Emma wasn't stupid. She managed to squeeze as much money out of Daniel as possible before kicking him to the curb. I felt no sympathy for Daniel. It was simply justice taking its course. Years passed, and I thought my past was finally behind me. But then, one day, I received a text from an unknown number. "Please call Mom. It's urgent. It's a matter of life and death." I almost ignored it. But curiosity got the better of me, and what I heard next made me laugh out loud. Emma was an end-stage kidney failure. She needed a transplant, urgently, and I, as her sister, was the most likely match. My parents, the same ones who once told me that family is everything, were now begging me to save their golden child. "We're family," my mother pleaded over the phone, her voice trembling. "I know the past hurt you, but this is life or death. You can hate us, but please, please help your sister." I was silent for a long moment, and then I said, "I'll get tested." I wanted to know, wanted to see for myself if I truly held her life in my hands. The test results confirmed it. I was the perfect match, the only one who could save her. I flew back to my old hometown, facing the family I had cut out of my life. When I arrived at the hospital, my parents looked at me with desperate hope. Emma lay in the bed, pale and weak. I met her gaze. "You can save me, can't you?" she whispered. I smiled, leaned in close, and whispered back, Yes, I'm the only one who can save you, and I won't. Her face drained of all color. Why not? I straightened, my voice cold as ice. Because you took my husband. Because our parents took my childhood. And now, the only thing I can take from you is your life. My mother burst into tears. You can't be this heartless. Do you want your sister to die? I looked at her, expressionless. I'm not your daughter anymore, and Emma isn't my sister. If you want to save her, find another way. I only came here to tell you this. I could save her, but I won't. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving behind my mother's sobs and Emma's desperate pleas. I stepped out of the hospital and took a deep breath. No more burdens, no more ghosts of the past. I had chosen myself. I had chosen the life I deserved. When I got home, James welcomed me with a warm embrace, his eyes filled with love and understanding. I smiled, a real smile, free of bitterness or pain. The past was behind me, and ahead lay a future where I was no longer a victim, but a victor. You may look at me and think I am cold-blooded, ruthless, and heartless, but do any of us not have the right to decide our own fate? Have any of us ever been able to accept sacrificing ourselves for those who are undeserving? Have you ever asked yourself, in those difficult moments, who truly deserves your sacrifice? Because sometimes, sacrifice is not a given, it's a choice, and I've chosen not to sacrifice for those who do not deserve it. Betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes, it comes from the very people we love and trust the most. But pain doesn't destroy us. How we choose to face it determines our fate. Forgiveness isn't always noble, and revenge doesn't have to be fueled by hatred. The sweetest form of vengeance is living well, moving forward without letting the past imprison us. Betrayers will ultimately destroy themselves, without us ever needing to lift a finger. Family isn't just about blood ties. It's about those who truly love and respect us. When a relationship becomes a toxic burden, letting go is the greatest form of freedom. Above all, self-worth and dignity are non-negotiable. No one has the right to demand sacrifices from someone they have trampled on. Learning to say no to those who don't deserve us is the greatest lesson in life. If you enjoy deep, emotional, and meaningful stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new update. Your support is the motivation that drives us to keep bringing you powerful stories. Once again, thank you for being here, and see you in the next story.